Given the current crisis in the construction sector, what can we expect in the area of energy efficient buildings?
Right. Well, let's say since 2007, both the housing market and the commercial property market have experienced substantial downturns, price decreases of up to 50%, both in the US and in the UK and continental Europe. And obviously, with budget constraints and liquidity constraints, one would expect that energy efficiency is becoming less important for both consumers and for commercial property investors. Interestingly, what we've seen over the course of the crisis, where these property returns went down, is that there's an increased interest in energy efficiency. Of course, there's issues with the upfront financing of energy efficiency investments, but at the same time, energy efficiency leads to operational cost savings. So what that means is that even in a time of austerity, if you can save on monthly, yearly outgoings, well, that's what consumers and commercial investors want to do. So if we look at trends, this holds for the United States, we actually see that the fraction of buildings labeled as energy efficient by the EPA and the Department of Energy, and the fraction of buildings labeled as sustainable by the US Green Building Council has actually increased, and not only increased, has exponentially increased. So we haven't actually seen a drop in interest in the labeling of these buildings, and we haven't seen a drop in interest in investing in the energy efficiency of existing buildings, also because new construction is on hold, and all the action is now taking place in existing buildings.
Is there a clear role for energy labeling for buildings?
Right. Well, for policymakers, there's various ways to go when you think about energy efficiency. So, on the one hand, you can think about building codes, but that just affects new construction. And energy labels are one way to increase information transparency or to resolve the asymmetric information problem in the real estate sector. So, we've looked at energy labels, or the EU EPCs in Europe, and we've also studied at Berkeley and Maastricht the effect of labels in the United States. And what we've documented is that these labels are quite effective in signaling the energy efficiency and also sustainability of both commercial real estate and private dwellings, so dwellings basically owned by consumers. And what we find is that these labels have implications for both rents, occupancy rates, and transaction prices. That's for the US, both pre-crisis and post-crisis, if we can say post-crisis. And in Europe, we basically find that the energy labels are reflected in transaction prices. So assuming the studies are well designed and take care of some of the important econometric issues here, I think we can carefully conclude that labels are effective in signaling the energy efficiency and sustainability of both residential as well as commercial properties.
Do you think the European Directive on Energy Efficiency in Buildings is well designed?
The European Energy Performance of Buildings Directive has just been through a revamp, and it was designed about a decade ago, just redesigned, and what we see now is that not only the ambitions for emission targets are still in place, and even though Doha hasn't been quite successful, and Durban, but importantly, the energy labels and the EPCs and how they're mandated across Europe are also still there. Is it well designed? Well, I think there's no perfectly designed policy, and the EPBD is, from that perspective, no exception. The big problem with the EPBD is basically the implementation and controlling of the implementation of, for example, the energy performance certificates. So while we see that some countries jumped on the EPBD and basically implemented EPCs, we haven't seen that in some other countries. So basically controlling on the implementation of the EPBD is very difficult. Are labels successful? Well, I think in those countries where they have been implemented, results are mixed. In the UK, there's a big outcry against EPCs. They're just not reliable. The barriers for engineers to enter, to give out these labels are just too low. Whereas in places like Holland and Germany, labels are accepted both in the residential and commercial market. So is it well designed? Well, nothing is perfect. Is it well implemented? I think there's room for improvement there. But it's certainly going into the right direction, and it's a very important signal for the market.